It'll be a few minutes, well, probably a few seconds.
Okay.
Let's see. All right. Hello and welcome to Action Greensboro's Live for 45. My name is Candace Martin and I am the Operations and Communications Manager for Action Greensboro. As always, if you have missed any of our sessions, they're all posted on our Facebook page, so we encourage you to check them out. Today, I'm here with Rodney Dawson, who I'm saying is my friend now because we've become very good colleagues. He is the Curator of Education at the Greensboro History Museum. A few months back, Rodney joined us as we talked about the history and knowledge of the Gillespie Golf Course and Dr. George Simpkin's role in that. And since then, at that same day, Rodney and I met in person when we both could not resist and went to Gillespie Grill for lunch. So I was told Rodney, we got to have him back. So welcome, Rodney, and thanks for joining us today.
Hey, this is great. I appreciate you having me. Only thing that could have been better if we were meeting at Gillespie Grill because it's
Exactly.
wet Wednesday right now.
Exactly. So today we're gonna talk about a new exhibit that the Greensboro History Museum has, and it's entitled Pieces of Now. So Rodney, before we get started about talking about the exhibit, remind folks, tell us a little about yourself, your background, and your role at the museum.
Okay, I'll try to make it brief, but I'm a product of here, the Triad. I grew up in High Point, North Carolina. And after high school, I went to Southwest Guilford High School, same high school as our county sheriff, Sheriff Rogers. Different times though.
Okay.
But went into the military after that. And I've always had a passion for history, but being in the military kind of cultivated it, particularly when I was in Operation Desert Storm, because I had a chance to meet people from all backgrounds, Saudi Arabians, Iraqis. We ran into French soldiers, British soldiers, you name it. And one of the things that I learned is that we all have so much in common. And one of the ties we have is the history. It plays a role and the history plays a role in how we see one another. And it shapes how we treat one another as well. And so when I got out of the military, got in the radio for a little bit. That's why I like to talk so much. But eventually I started teaching. And so started teaching and, so it shaped education. The Latin word for education is educere, to lead out, to lead someone to their fullest potential. Mm-hmm. So that became my purpose in life, was to educate others and educate myself. So when I was teaching, I learned from my students more than they taught me. I eventually went and got a master's degree in instructional technology and EDS in educational leadership, and currently finishing up my doctorate in educational leadership. And so I try to use that training and love for education and then tie history in. And I've always read the history of particularly our nation abroad, foreign affairs. Mm-hmm. And then domestically, it's always been an emphasis on the plight of African Americans. And so taking this job was a godsend because I've been able to use all that, use the military connection, the military experience, the teaching experience as curator of education. I work with people like you at Action Greensboro, the Guilford County Schools, Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, our home school associations, the charter, you name it, and even our institutions of higher learning. And when you know the history of something, you are better positioned to understand why things happen today. So if you know the history of the exhibit we're talking about, Pieces of Now, you can trace back why a muralist used a certain symbol or targeted a certain street, why an organizer committed themselves to be out there for hours at a time, because they traced it back to history. I did this because my grandma told me this, so forth and so on. And really quick, I can tell you why Pieces of Now is so essential and it's so special to me. The grounds that we sit on now, we're at 130 Summit Avenue. It was the home to First Presbyterian Church of Greensboro, which first established itself in 1824, had 12 members, 4 of whom were enslaved. All right. Eventually, they moved to the corner of Church and Lindsay and Summit, where we are right now, in the 1850s. And so throughout the 1850s, we had a civil war in 1865. The church served as a Confederate hospital, at that time. And they've since, after the war, the formerly enslaved left First Presbyterian and then started their own church, St. James Presbyterian, the one on Ross Street in Greensboro. And so it just shows you the progress we've made, or the circle we're going. And I should say that First Presbyterian Church of Greensboro recognizes the relationship they have with St. James, and that they had folks that own slaves, and they're continuously working hard to this day to honor and put things into practice to bring healing to the injuries that racism has brought. And so they've got a sister relationship between the two. But if you look at back in 1865, I can't do the math, my head hurts, some 150 years ago, to today, you have an exhibit that depicts the social justice movement that occurred in Greensboro in 2020. So it's just remarkable for me.
It is. Wow. And I never even knew that history about the museum and the land that it's on.
Right. Yeah, we took it over. We were here. It was the United Way, to my understanding, the Greensboro Public Library, and then the museum. United Way left, got their own building. We know the public library left, and the museum just stayed here. So I know the land itself is what served as the Confederate Hospital. I can't say about the actual buildings here. But a viewer, someone that came to visit the Pieces of Now exhibit, pointed that out to me.
Wow. Wow. Well, I was invited to come take a sneak peek of the exhibit along with our executive director, Cecilia Thompson. And it's really amazing the way you all have developed, I guess, a story, but also left space for continued conversations and added stories, because it's happening now. So kind of tell me about the intent of this whole exhibit and kind of how it came about.
Well, they wanted to depict it as we know that some exhibits, like if you looked at an exhibit about, sorry about that. If you look at an exhibit about World War I, which we had in that space before, you know the beginning and you know the end. Well, this is history happening now, so you can't bring the conclusion. We don't know what's going to unfold. We don't know what's going to unfold after the election. Right. And we also knew that we don't know what we don't know. And so while we were able to talk to some of the business owners and we were able to talk to some of the protest organizers, there's still some people out there that we have yet to have a conversation with. I just took a phone call 30 minutes ago from a muralist who had a mural on a business downtown, and he's wanting to inquire about having his mural displayed here. We didn't know about him. The mayor came through on a visit, very much like what you and Cecilia did, and said, hey, you're missing this piece. This is a wonderful exhibit, but you need to talk to this person. So we went out and talked to that person. So we intentionally left space because we knew we were going to add to it. But more importantly than that, we didn't want to put a museum lens on it. We didn't want to put our perspective on it. We wanted to be more of a community curation of an exhibit, where we're asking people to get involved and have conversations and tell us what we're missing or give us their story. We're not an art museum, so those pieces are beautiful, but I don't have the experience to critique it. We picked it based off the narrative behind it. So it wasn't like we looked at it and said, oh, that's so beautiful. Look at the strokes and look at the approach that the artist used. No, we just said, what's the story behind this piece? Let's find that story. Let's talk to some people. They in turn led us to other folks, and they in turn would say, you need to talk to this person, or somebody told us we were missing something. So that's the intent, is not to say this is the Greensboro History Museum's lens or shaping of this exhibit. We are the focal point. We're a place where people can come and have a discussion.
I like that. So let's talk more about kind of the conversations and partnerships that you all developed, with the business owners and the artists to start telling the story of this exhibit? Like, what kind of conversations, or like what will people see when they come into the exhibit?
It's a beautiful thing. It's still ongoing. We're still talking to new people, and the relationship that we built with people that we otherwise probably would never have known.
Wow.
One of the more remarkable people that I probably ever meet in my life, I met a 27-year-old I met because of the Pieces of Now exhibit. And I'm expecting big things out of her. And one day I'm going to say, I knew her. I knew her when, and she better loan me some money too. But but it started out, we were speaking with some of the business owners, and there's one particular business owner whose business was affected, and her windows were shattered. And so there was a day where we finally got with folks and said, hey, we want to get these murals, but we want to be this museum that's swooping in, taking up all this art. And so we talked to different organizations within the city, even talked to the Civil Rights Museum, and decided we were going to get permission from the muralists and from the business owners or the landlord, if that needed to be the case. And we hired a moving company and picked up the art. And so a lot of the muralists in the news were invited to come. So my boss came to me and said, it'd be a good idea if you go down there and you do a podcast, History Notes. He said, it'd be a good idea if you go down there and talk to some of them. And so I did. And one of the first persons I talked to was Jennifer Graff, who owns a business down there. And she told me, she said, Rodney, I don't mind doing this. She said, my store was affected. And she helped galvanize her community. She says, but I don't want the story to be about a bunch of looting. And she said, because while my my window was damaged, it was a small select few. Matter of fact, some of the protesters banded together to protect my store. So I want it to be about the story. I want this narrative to be controlled. And she says, and I've been working hard with my community to do so. And she invited her artist friends. They all gather around there. She invited all of them to come, and they just started galvanizing their little community and started doing these projects. And then whatever they needed, they would put out a word on Facebook. We need pizza, we need supplies, we need water, and people would just bring it. And then we got in contact with a photographer, a lot of educators. I'm a former teacher, so I get excited when I talk about these educators, but a lot of educators really pushed this thing. There was a teacher, Kevin Green, who has a photography business, wonderful photographer, took over 1,200 pictures. As we're going through the pictures, we're like, hey, this person's popping up all the time. Who is this? And then we talked to this person. There's one picture that went viral with a pastor, Pastor Michael Harris, holding the hand of a 4-year-old white girl whose dad, Emery, her dad said, hey, kids, took the son and the daughter. Kids, you want to learn about protests? Took them downtown and said, it's COVID-19, stay close to me. Little girl breaks away from the hand, runs up, says, I want to protest, and sticks her hand out. And this guy that's marching grabs her hand. Kevin happens to be right on the scene, takes the picture, it goes viral. And
I think I saw the E News like reposted that picture or something like that.
It did.
Yeah.
And then the gentleman with the vest, Pastor Harris, he's a pastor, and so he said, can you add a scripture to it? So you have a scripture from 1 Corinthians added to it. Wow. And we did a whole Zoom with that. But just talking to Emery, young Emery, 4 years old, and the beauty of her looking into the eyes of this guy with no fear, no preconceived notions about him, just that I want to learn to protest. I want to help. Let's do this together. And the father having the wherewithal, the foresight to say, I want to bring my kids to learn this, and talking to him, he was more passionate about the subject than I was. He was putting me to shit. And and from that, meeting the protest organizers that were strategic about the location that they chose. I mean, it wasn't just, I want to go to Elm Street. They studied this thing, and they had a purpose in mind. And when you meet these folks, I say young people because I'm a little older now, but when you meet them, we have a solid future among us. A lot of people doubt that, but they have a passion about them. And it was Black, white, Hispanic, LGBTQ. They were all getting themselves involved and working together for a common cause. Now, sure, they all had different perspectives, and I'm not saying they all got along, but they realized it's something bigger than ourselves. And so when you get to talk to those people and build those relationships with business owners, with protest organizers, with muralists, with folks that are covering the story, and talking to the people that didn't agree. That's important too. There's gonna be some folks that says, I don't think this is called for. I object to how it was done, but let's have a conversation. And that's the beauty of the exhibit. Let's have a conversation. Let's be civil, but let's have a discussion. That's the only way you're gonna have healing come forth. I'm talking a lot, sorry.
No, you're here to educate, give us the knowledge. So we want you to share some photos of the exhibit. Do you have a favorite, I guess, portion of the exhibit? Is there a particular piece that you like the most?
Well, you know what? Once we go through these photos, I might pick one out. I can't think of one right now.
Okay.
I do have one. I do have one. This is the picture here that went viral. You can see that? Okay, that's young Emery. That's Pastor Harris. And like I say, Kevin took this picture, and then Marshall Lakes was the muralist that said, I want to go downtown and I want to paint, but I only want to paint that. And that's what he painted. You see, it's in about 3 pieces. And there's the scripture, 1 Corinthians 10 and 31. That's Pastor Harris. That's young Emery. And over here, it's kind of hard to see, but that's Kevin Green. That's the one that took the pictures. Our exhibit designer, Robert Harris, he put all this together. This is his vision. This is kind of talent we got in this city and in this museum under the vision of our director, Carol Hart. But he wanted to give that feel of so many things swirling in the air. In 2020, I thought the biggest story was going to be Kobe Bryant's death. I forgot. After everything that's happened, I almost forgot that he passed away this calendar year. But there were so many things that happened, COVID. And so you see these pieces here? These are what Robert calls swag pieces, right? This writing right here was on the sidewalk. And it starts off, Dear White People. But it was on the sidewalk. And someone wrote that. They didn't come forward to tell us who they are. I guess that's illegal. But we were able to take a picture of that and have it printed onto this mat. You can actually walk on that mat. And I'm still scared to walk on it, but you can walk on it. I wish I could zoom in, but that box right there, that little shirt, that's young Emery's shirt. And that vest, that's Pastor Harris's vest. I asked Pastor Harris why he donated the vest. I said, why'd you wear the vest? He said, I'm prior service. I said, man, you are? I'm prior service too. We were both in the Army. He said, I still have a great love for this country, to the point where I served for it, as I did as well. And but that vest reminds him of his Army days. But he just wanted to see change. He said, I'm just getting tired and frustrated, but I want to see some change. Here's a more closer view of that. And you can see those swag pieces that I'm talking about.
Wow, that's really cool.
Stop me, Candace, because you know from last time, you got to stop me to interject.
No, we got people that haven't seen it, so we gotta show us everything. Well, show us as much as you can, or as much as you want to.
We'll do this little monitor right here. That's where we had a Zoom call with Kevin Green, with Pastor Harris, with Emery and her father, and Marshall Lakes, the muralist. So when you come in, you'll see a lot of interactors, a lot of monitors. You'll see this monitor, and that's the actual Zoom session that we had. And even Emery, the young Emery, played a starring role in that Zoom recording as well.
Wow.
I tell you, we got some talent. This is Gina Franco. Gina Franco is one of the local artists / activism, and she did this Black Lives Matter mural. And to the left of it, you can't see it. There's another monitor where we're interviewing Gina, and we interviewed a lot of them together. And you'll see single footage, but we did them outside on location, and some of it we did here.
Yeah, Gina is great. We actually featured her in our Made in Greensboro campaign, and just being able to meet her and just hear her story was just amazing. She's a very talented artist.
Absolutely. She's spreading it within her family. I don't know if I have a picture, but her young niece is also an artist who has a mural displayed as well.
Wow.
There's a gentleman named Rasheem Pugh, and I always brag on him. Rasheem is originally from up top, as he likes to say, New Jersey. And he was a singer-songwriter. And I'm dating myself, but he co-wrote an album, Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. And he won 5 Grammys behind that. And so he came to Greensboro and started the Save the Arts Foundation, which his mission is to expose artists. And so he did a lot of the videography for us. And I was telling him, Rasheem, I need contributions. I'm missing a hip hop feel to this. Any rappers, any poets? So this was like on a Thursday. And he called his partner, Nikisha Wrights, and she put together a poem, and he produced it. And when you come in, you can see this poem displayed right here. And then throughout the exhibit, you'll see the lyrics to the poem that Robert printed on the walls throughout the exhibit. But the name of the poem is We Are Human. Human is spelled Hueman. Rashim also did a Black Lives Matter table. He did a Say Their Names table, but this is the Black Lives Matter table that he did, and it has all the many of the people that we've lost at the hands of the police through this movement after the death of George Floyd. And so that's on exhibit. He has another one that's not on exhibit. We'll probably feature it online called Say Their Names, and it highlights all of the women, including Breonna Taylor.
Wow.
There's another store owner, I hope I got a better picture, Victoria Milstein. She did this picture here. She owns VCM Studio, and I don't have it, but she did this one here. And you should go to her shop and find the history of her shop. She's doing beautiful work, but she thought, she's a Jewish woman from New York, and she thought what it would be like to be an African-American mother raising a child and having to have these conversations with them. And she saw this little girl right here walking with her father, and she said, "You mind if I take a picture? I would like to paint her." And I can't do it justice because you only see part of it, but she has some words, justice, and some other words, but a lot of meaning behind this. But that's the little girl that she painted.
Wow.
You'll see that. Teachers right here, two of the protest organizers, history teacher right here, Jordan Cameron. She teaches history. And he's a kind of like an instructional technologist now, but he used to be a music teacher, but he's still in the education. That's Brandon Green, who invited his family to come see it. He told me, he said, "Can I come see it, show it to my family, Mr. Dawson?" I said, "You sure can." I said, "Bring a couple of them." He brought them 30 deep, and they were dressed to the nines. I was like, "Come on, man, I'm dressed in jeans and a shirt." But they were part of the organizers, and you see them here. But those are two educators, brilliant educators. Jordan right here, and we did something with the Smithsonian Youth Summit just a couple of weeks ago. But we have their story. They're also featured in some interviews, and you can see they donated the clothes that they wore on the days that they were out there. But you see, we can control our fate, build together, heal, stand strong. And that's what we're looking. We needed to get the perspective from law enforcement. So we did speak to our county sheriff, and we spoke to Greensboro Police Chief Brian James. And so if you go into one part of the gallery, you'll see that interview. You'll see this is not the same bow tie. I did have a different tie. But then right here, you'll see a box with some of the shattered glass from where rocks were thrown. And we have some pictures here. And then that was uprooted from the ground. Some may remember seeing this in downtown Greensboro. I probably feel like I should pause here, Candace, if you want to ask me a question or something.
No, let me see if we got any questions from Facebook. No questions, but people are loving the exhibit. So show us more.
Come check it out. I have to give you the hours before we get out of here.
Yes, we will go over that.
Okay. The Woolworth sit-in, the counter which we had the Woolworth sit-in with the ANT4, it's broken up into 3 sections. The largest section rests at the International Civil Rights Museum. Then there's another section at the Smithsonian. The 3rd section is housed here at the Greensboro History Museum. And so we look at this mural here that was done by Mike Worth. They said, "We stand," May 30th, 2020. That was the one of the big days for the protest, and then there was the following Sunday as well. I got a story to tell about that. And then, of course, the sit-ins that happened in February 1, 1960, full 60 years later, not to the day, but 60 years later. See this right here? That's one of the actual stools that was at the Woolworth sit-in counter.
Wow.
So you juxtapose that to what took place in 2020. Man. And so I thought that was a good comparison, a good connection that people can make. I had mentioned Jordan Cameron and Brandon Green. These are the items they wore, the shoes and shirt. And Virginia was also heavily involved, one of the organizers. We might see her later, but that's a bag that she wore. This was Time for Change. I think this was at the skateboard shop downtown.
Gotcha.
And, here I can brag on this one. COVID, we can't forget about COVID. So, that was, I asked the police, I said, "Hey, what was it like, having to honor, you had to abandon social distancing, but yet you're out there, had to enforce safety." And they said, "Well, safety trumped everything else." But, we had to, what is it like for an officer to have to be out there and some of the challenges that happen there? And what's it like to be a protester that looks at the police that may not be on their side. You know, it's just some conversations that need to be had there. I'm gonna see if I have this. I do. My wife is a midwife. I talked about my wife. You know, we were talking about the Hill-Burton Act with the Gillespie Park. And one of the reasons she's able to work, that's her lab coat. She participated in white coats for Black Lives, where they had a lot of primary care givers go to a Moses Cone campus and they kneeled for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. She participated in that. There's a picture right there of my wife, my daughter's in there, and some of her colleagues. But she donated or loaned us her lab coat. And that's a picture of my wife. And you know, my wife used to work at Women's Hospital, but they now have their own. They built a new wing at Moses Cone. Supposed to turn Women's Hospital into a behavioral health, which they still plan to do. However, that's been put on hold. Now it's a COVID-19 hospital. So this video kind of talks about what went into making that change and that preparation with so little time. But I think they've done a good job. I'm a layman. I don't know much about the medical field, but from what I can tell, they've done an exceptional job. Here's some more swag pieces here. On the other side, there's a piece. I didn't get a picture of it, but on the other side of this wall, there's a piece done by Philip Marsh. And he did it for over a business. And as it was resting on that business, somebody came and spray painted white power across it. So, you know, everything wasn't warm and fuzzy, you know, and I try to remind people, and Philip reminded me of this. Greensboro came together. We had some folks that didn't like it, but this all derives from Black pain. Somebody died and it sparked this. It was a trigger, you know, so we have to remember that. More of the Moses Cone healthcare heroes, which they indeed are heroes, working 12+ hour shifts. Didn't have the PPEs, you know. My wife got exposed, and thankfully didn't contract it, but was at risk, got exposed. You know, had to see a patient and find out a couple of days later, hey, they contracted COVID-19, the coronavirus.
Wow.
And then she'd have to quarantine. Here it is. I did get it. This is Philip Marsh, and this is the paint he did on point over a business. I think it was the barbershop, On Point Barbershop on Elm. Someone spray painted that. They spray painted on some other ones, but Philip chose to leave it up there as a reminder to show. And we have an interactive right beside it, immediately to the right, where he's giving an interview talking about this and other things. But as a remander that, as my young folks used to say, the struggle is real. There's a reason they're out there.
It's very real. Yes.
Young Brandy right here. She did this piece, Stronger Together. Brandy's a school teacher. I mentioned Gina's niece right here, Jasmine. She did this piece here, this mural.
Wow.
And they're also featured in an interview. One of the mentors for one of the artists, Ashley Griffin, and one of the protest organizers and artists, Virginia Holmes, their mentor is Darlene McClinton, who teaches at A&T, and she runs Arts Block at UNCG, and she runs Arts Greensboro. She did this piece, Homage to Our Ancestors. And there's history. There's a reason she had this gold crown. If you study the history, you'll know what went into that. You know, and there's a reason she has these fists. You know, but if you don't know the history, you're going to look at this and say, oh, that's a neat idea. But when you know the historical perspective, you're going to say, oh, this is powerful. You know, so that's why history just ties into everything. It doesn't have to be in a history class or political science class. You could tie history to science. You could tie it to math. You can tie it to language arts. But this is Darlene here. Hopefully that's the piece that went viral. And that's back at the beginning. But I didn't get in this one the piece of Virginia, who's the remarkable young lady that just so impressed me. And she and her whole organization, all of them, these young folks, Jordan and Pastor Mike, he's a young guy as well. Let me stop sharing so you can have your computer back.
Cool. So I forgot what part we were at, but you said you had a story to tell us.
I did. I'm going to talk. What was the story?
I can't remember.
What was the story? I told you about Rasheen. I told you about, oh man, one young lady, maybe this was it, but one young lady that I'm thinking of. How we doing on time?
We're good.
Okay. That I'm thinking of, a product of Warrensville. And we had an exhibit here featuring Warrensville before my time. but there's still a fragment of it. But if you know about Warrensville, it was called a social experiment. Quaker Yardley Warner purchased the land. Gentleman, what they call one of the founders or fathers of Warrensville, Harmon Unthank, went to his community, said, hey, we can get this land and we can build our own community. And he did that, and it became a thriving community, self-sustained by African Americans. And it got to the point where it was so influential that people like Harmon Unthank got their names ended up on a disenfranchisement document. And we have a copy of that here at the museum on our second floor. And that disenfranchisement document, if your name was on that document and you tried to vote, they like, no, not here, not today. Wow. And it was unlawful, but that's what happened. And so you have people that know that history, that come from that community, that's since been bought out. I think it's been bought out. And so you have people that come from the community, come from that lineage, and understand the history of what's going on in Greensboro. And then get those stories passed down from grandmother to mother, and then to a younger person today. And then that younger person seeks to find change. Right. And become a protest organizer, and then calls the museum and say, we want to find out where the Black-owned businesses were in the early 1900s in Greensboro. And finds out there were a few, but they're not enough. So we probably need to go and target this particular street for a protest. And it's hot. It's 90 degrees out, and I've run out of water. And I feel like my life is in danger. And I feel like there's no one here to support me. But I'm going to stay out there because there's somebody coming after me. And I'm only 27. Most of these folks, white, Black, but I'm particularly talking about one person right now who represents a lot of them. And I've been doing this since before George Floyd, so I have credibility. And I come from a Warrensville community, so I have a historical tie to wanting to see change. And then you ask them, why did you put yourself in danger, and get hit with rubber bullets and get subjected to tear gas and things like that? Why did you stay out there when it was that hot? And when you got hungry, why didn't you go home? That's the history that's behind it that kept that person out there on May 30th and May 31st. And wow. They continue to do the work. And so when you trace it back, same thing with a muralist. When you trace back what prompted them to inspire them to paint this, and why do they use that crown, and why do they use this color? The piece that Virginia did, she's an interpreter. She believes you see the piece, you interpret it for yourself. She doesn't label it. And beautiful piece. I should have had it in here. Beautiful piece. And so she's leading the protest, and she's also an artist. By the way, her work is now featured at a museum in Florence, Italy. She's the first American artist that they featured. Wow. So, 27 years old, coming from this, and I wish I could go. I don't have a permission to tell our whole story. But people out there helping. But life's not been easy, but she represents people that says we got to move forward to make a change, and we have to have our allies to do this, and they recognize it. And so when you take someone like that, and you that piece that she did, she took whatever she had in front of her to make that painting. She said when she was doing that painting, a homeless man was beside her, said, hey, I'll give you $1 if you buy a cigarette for me. She bought him a cigarette. Don't judge her. She bought him a cigarette. She took the $1, ground the $1 up, put that in the painting. Took the ashes of the cigarette, put that in the painting. Wow. When you see that, you can go look at that piece and say, oh, that's nice. I'll buy that and stick it up in my living room, maybe. But when you see what that represents, why she chose whatever she had, knowing where she came from, what she represents, the Warrensville community, and what she's trying to achieve, and that she wants you to interpret it. I want you to look at it and get your own perspective from it. I'm going to take ashes and a ground up $1 and include that in the painting. You're not going to know that, but it gives it more meaning. It makes it that much more powerful. And these are pieces that she put into that painting. That's her piece. She spoke her piece that way. Our artist said, this is how we're going to speak. Some people do it through poetry. Some people do it through write. Some do it through just a conversation. But she took the pieces of now and made that painting. And they also did, along with the House of Wax, they did an introductory piece. So when you walk in, you're going to see this beautiful piece that kind of sets you up for what you're about to see. Pieces of what's happening now, and I should have said this, but my year is 1968. I was born in 71. Forget that information later. But I'm fascinated by 1968 because of political movements, the assassinations, because of the things that happened on college campuses. And so I go back and I said, what was it like to live in 1968? I talked to a younger person one time. He said his year is 1992 with the Dream Team and with Rodney King. And so what we're trying to do without putting our lens on it is people can walk in there and get an idea, whether it's 5 days from now, 50 years from now, it won't be up that long, but they can get an idea of what it was like to be around in 2020 in Greensboro.
Wow. So you just mentioned, um, well, your comment, it won't be up that long. So how long is it going to be up? And like, what's next for the exhibit? I know you want to continue like having conversations. Will there be like, any like virtual tours or, what's going to come out of it?
Absolutely. Now, I say the physical space, we got to get ready for another exhibit. So I've been told at least 6 months. You got time. You don't have to come out this week. Come out many times. Come out this weekend. Yeah. I want to tell you not come. But we got at least 6 months where we'll rest. It's going to live forever online. Matter of fact, because of COVID, we don't want you coming in and spending hours in the exhibit. So we don't have a lot of extensive labeling. So you get a piece. Like you might look at a video and only have a 2-minute segment, but if you go online, you'll see the full video. And then it's supposed to spark from that. We want conversations to derive, whether it's from a webinar. We got a webinar series that we just started, Indigenous in North Carolina. That was sparked from an idea from Pieces of Now, and where we're talking about just the different things that are happening that we need to discuss. So it could be a webinar. You might see a History Notes podcast. You might see a history lunch breaks that our colleague Glenn Perkins does, and different virtual programming. You name it, we're going to drive everything to online. We'll have a virtual tour up, and it's going to be fascinating. When you've seen those real estate websites where you can take your mouse and click and walk through a house. That's the way this exhibit is going to be. But check this out. When you go to that video I was telling you about, the We Are Human, done by Nikisha Wright, you see that video in the virtual tour, you click it and the video will pop up and play. And then the educational element of it, we talked to some of the artists, got more to talk to. Well, we're going to break it down. We talked to them and did like a 12-minute interview and say, tell us about this piece. And we're going to break it down to like a lesson plan for a classroom.
Wow.
So we have a moderator, and then the person tells about their piece, what went into it, not like artistic style, but what your mind has to be like, what you have to prepare for. And you can use this in classrooms. And then let's say the first 3 minutes, and then the host will turn and say, all right, class, turn to your neighbor. So-and-so mention this, have a discussion, and then come back and hit resume. And so that will be available online. And then the hope is when you take that virtual tour and you hover around that actual piece, that mural, you click on it. And if it's one where we have a lesson plan attached to it, you'll have access to that as well. So that's going to live forever, But space-wise, we're looking at least 6 months. And then you ask, what's next? What's next is virtual. We're going to fill up our virtual platform, and we're trying to get out to these schools. I've been talking to GCS. I would love for people, when I was teaching, I used to have a go-to resource. I was a media specialist, and I wanted my library to be a go-to resource. And then I would use other platforms as a go-to resource, like iReady and things like that. I want the museum to be that. And so for the educators out there, whether it's a classroom educator or a Sunday school teacher or just a lifelong learner, we can be a go-to resource where you can find some information, particularly as it relates to Greensboro.
I love that.
And so this big social involvement is our big push. So after the Pieces of Now leads, we're moving into Project Democracy. We had the Smithsonian exhibit, American Democracy. But Project Democracy is going to specifically focus on North Carolina. And one of the big issues we're going to look at is voting and gerrymandering.
Yeah.
That's still an issue today. And so even after the election and when this exhibit is up, that's still going to be something we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Presentation.
So if someone has never been to the museum, what else can they expect to see when they come?
Well, you can see Pieces of Now. We mentioned the Woolworth sit-in counter that we have. We have, of course, Dolly Madison. When you walk in, you can learn a lot about Dolly Madison, Old Greensboro, which is on the same floor as Pieces of Now, the Crystal Theater. These are areas where we had a lot of schools do their tours. But it kind of depicts Greensboro. the Crystal Theater. One of the terms I learned just from giving tours is Nickelodeon. And Odeon was a Greek theater. Like they back in the day, you would have entertainment. You go to this field, and then they would have a stage erected, but it started to rain, so they would build a covering. And so when you came, they would charge you 5 cents to see this play or whatever. So that 5 cents, Nickelodeon. So you can kind of learn more about things like that. But really online at greensborohistory.org, see our podcast, see our webinars that we have. But that's going to be our big push. Oh, the museum hours right now, the COVID hours, closed on Sunday, closed on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 10 to 5, Thursday, 10 to 7, and then Friday, Saturday, 10 to 5.
Okay. We had a question from Facebook. Christine says, are there any intergenerational events planned where elders and youth can discuss these topics?
There are some planned. We did a webinar called Lessons in Racism, and I think the youngest person, it's on YouTube, it was in our History, Race, and Education series. And these were former teachers. They were Ever Achievers Retired Teachers Club. They were the first teachers that African-American teachers that found themselves teaching integrated classrooms in Guilford County. And their ages range from 80 to 91, 92 years old. And they were talking about lessons they learned during their movement when they were working in the 50s and 60s. And then we have conversations planned with some that just participated in the 2020s. And so these are folks that are in their 20s, early 30s. We want to marry the two up and have a conversation with representatives from each group. I talked to Lewis Brandon, who's a local historian, and I asked him, I said, he's been around since the 60s, helped push the sit-in movement. I could go on for days talking about him. I said, is there anything, have any of these young activists reached out to you? And he said, yes. And so you have people like AJ Morgan and the folks that we talked about earlier today that are reaching out, and we'd love to get a story with them as well. And then we have folks on the outside that are working for healing. For my podcast, if I can plug it, it comes out on January 12th, but I talked to the executive pastor of First Presbyterian, Neil Donovan, and he's just talking about the work he's doing. They just hired their first, I learned from my assistant, Catherine, that they just hired their first, I believe their first female head pastor.
Wow.
And so they had an interim for some time, but the executive pastor, Neil Donovan, wonderful guy. He's the one that was giving me the history about First Presbyterian and the work they've done. He said led by young people in their church to bring about healing. So I love to have discussions with different generations, talking about different angles on how they're going to move the needle forward as it relates to social justice.
That's great. Rodney, as always, you have filled us with so much knowledge, and I hope that everyone watching will definitely get to the museum and not only see this exhibit, but everything, all the other exhibits in the museum. And the gift store is really nice too. It's a lot of pottery in there that's really nice.
I think you have to go online to get it now, but you can come and don't worry. I'm not sure what our capacity. I think it's 50%. But it's based on the space. So if you come and one particular room is pieces of mouth is filled up, which is a good thing, you got so much square footage to see.
Exactly.
So you'll be able to get in and spend some time to wear your mask, and we'll stay socially distant. And but I just want people to enjoy it and learn something from it. But really, come bring your perspective. Let's come tolerant, learning, and loving of this great city we got. It has its issues, it's had its problems, but we got to work on it.
That's it. So thanks again, Rodney. 2 quick commercials before we go. Next week, we talked a lot about education. So next week we will have some educators join us and talk about how we as a community can support educators in disruptive times. So we want to show our support for our educators and our education system and make sure our students have the best of the best. And then to close out the month, we'll have the Downtown Greenway come back. They'll do a golf cart tour. But this time it will be on the sections under construction. So I know we've last time we did it, the sections that are open. So this time it will be the sections that are under construction, and will soon be in completion. Tomorrow, the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce will host their monthly coffee and conversation. So that will start at 9 a.m. and it will be virtual. We'll put a link in the chat where you can sign up if you would like to join us. But circling back around to education, Cecilia Thompson, our executive director, and Frank Thomas, who is a pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church in High Point, they are co-chairs for the Smart Bond School campaign. So they will be on the call advocating for the support of this campaign and the importance of it. Because just as we said, we want to make sure our students have the best, and the schools play a major part in it. So we will put that link in the chat. We want to remind everybody early voting starts tomorrow. So whatever your view is, whatever your view is, use it and make sure your vote is heard. I'll leave it at that. Rodney, thank you again. Is there any last thoughts?
I found out what the story was. I remember it. From
Okay.
our last conversation, some of your viewers and I got together. We're working on a documentary called 450 and Change, A Journey of Perseverance. The Greensboro 6 paid 75 cents a piece. It equaled 450 and led to all that change.
Wow. Oh, yes, you did tell me that. That's so amazing. So
Yeah.
I'm glad people are watching and paying attention. So, Rodney, we might have to make this like a quarterly thing. Like we'll know each quarter we're going to have a history lesson from you.
Absolutely. It was thanks to you all.
Yeah.
I met up with these wonderful guys. We've interviewed the Fries, Jim Melvin, Lewis Brandon. We just going on and on. So it's going to take a while, but we're getting it done.
Wow, that's great. Well, thank you again, and we will see you next time. Have a great day, Greensboro.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rodney.